Welcome to Unlocking Human Potential with me, Andy Hosgood, a show dedicated to exploring what it really takes psychologically, behaviourally and practically to help humans thrive through conversations with leaders, founders, coaches, behavioural experts and people shaping how humans perform and grow. Is this for you? But if you're a leader, a founder, a business owner or an ambitious professional who wants to do more than just perform, they want to grow, inspire and bring the best out in themselves and their people, then keep listening, because the mission is simple: to explore how individuals and teams unlock potential in themselves, in others and the organisations they shape. Every episode is a deep but relaxed conversation built around three core questions. How do you optimise yourself? How do you unlock potential in others? And the best advice for you, the listener. Now over to the episode. Really hope you find it helpful and insightful. Paul?
Hi, Andy.
Yeah, and welcome to Unlocking Human Potential.
Very much. Good to be here.
Thank you very much for coming on to this. I know your schedule's really tight, so it's been brilliant that we could make this happen. So for the listeners, our guest today is Paul, an experienced relational integrative psychotherapist based in Preston. Before retraining as a therapist in 2017, he spent almost 20 years in the corporate world with a career spanning management, leadership, sales and sales training. He understands firsthand the high pressure environments where professional success often comes at a personal cost. In his clinical practice, Paul uses relational integrative approach, meaning he doesn't believe in one size fits all solution. Instead, he draws on from a toolkit of psychological frameworks, most notably attachment theory and affect phobia theory, to help his clients understand the internal working models that drive their behavior. While Paul works with men and women, his particular interest in male mental health, helping men navigate the male gender script, bridging the gap between biological drive for achievement and psychological need for internal security. So thank you.
No problem.
I mean, for me, I've been very fortunate for the listeners to have many of these conversations in a changing room after spending an hour very close in our gym that we both train at in Preston. So, when the thought of trying to put the Unlocking Human Potential podcast together, I think you were one of the very, I'm thinking of doing this. would you be up for this conversation? And very kindly went, yeah, mate, I will. So I'm really delighted to see where this goes. So like we always do on this podcast, curiosity seems to be an underpinning of everything and every guest that we have on. So what's something you're curious about right now?
So professionally, I am kind of mulling over whether I train as a supervisor or do additional training to be a couples counselor. But what I'm really curious about in the here and now is the level of anxiety that I feel doing this now that it's come around.
Okay.
So the way I practice is relational integrative, as you've said, and that's all about the relationship between people and what goes on in that. The technical term might be called the intersubjective third. And what I notice is that despite seeing having done thousands of sessions by now with clients and seeing many different types of clients and never really knowing what they're going to walk through the door with, there's always that kind of uncertainty. And also in a previous career doing lots and lots of public speaking, stood at the front of rooms, doing things like that. I'm quite curious as to why I feel the level of anxiety that I do doing this. So when people wonder about, well, what's relational integrative? It's exactly that. It's kind of working with the content in the here and now.
Okay.
So I think it would be remiss of me to not do that. This is literally what is going on for me now. So when people say, "Oh, how are you doing?" It'd be some kind of glib reply of like, "Oh, I'm doing okay." Well, no, the truth is I feel in a somewhat hyper aroused state at the moment, and I have done as this has got closer, so I've had to kind of take steps to down regulate myself and check in with myself and get myself into a position where I can give this my best shot, really. So that's what I'm curious about. And I'm curious about, will that ever really go away, or is it something that is just with me and something that I will continue to try and integrate as I age and get older and things like that?
Can I throw a curiosity question there?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
is that something? Because I think a lot of people listening can relate to that, can't they? When they're, and when there's something set in the diary, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they go, "Oh, I'm feeling something around this."
Yeah.
Um, and is there a need for people who may be listening to interpret that or try and make sense of it, or is it just embracing what it is and just being aware of what it is?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, the kind of cornerstone of my well-being and resilience and ability to keep going on is that emotional honesty,
Mm.
um, continuing to try and understand myself, and then with that self-compassion. And I've found that if I kind of bring those three things together, then that's kind of me being the best I can be.
Yeah.
And the best I can be is, to bring another kind of understanding, and it is good enough,
Okay.
you know. So and a lot of so whether people need to be aware of it, whether I guess I understand, or it seems that a lot of the people that I meet that come through these doors, um, they may be aware of that kind of elevated state and existing in maybe a chronic kind of hyperarousal, depending on what's gone on in their history. Um, and it's kind of identifying that, it's learning how to down regulate it, learning maybe where that's come from, why it's still kind of around. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of how I deal with it, and how I've dealt with, like, the last hour before this was kind of like, okay, I need to, what's going on here, why might I be like this? And um I guess most people, if they don't sort of take steps to kind of really look it in the eye and pull it apart and work with it, seems like they're white knuckling it,
Okay.
just kind of not really doing anything about it. It's just there. It just happens all the time or regularly, and it's just what happens, and I just have to push through it. And I was like that as well until I kind of retrained to do this job, and then
Yeah.
had a better understanding, and
Yeah.
and then start to somewhat practice what
Well,
I preach.
yeah, yeah. Well, but and I think that I think you know. So if you are listening to this and you're aware of that, and you can relate to a lot of things Paul's saying, I think one of the things that certainly for me, I like the fact that you're owning it, that you're almost saying it out
Mm,
loud, but actually then it's going, okay, so there's an acknowledgement, and then what do I need to do? There's an acceptance piece I heard of going, well, just be good enough,
yeah,
and be, and,
yeah.
and that word kind of authenticity then comes across, doesn't it? Because if you guess, and
Mm,
that's, I know that's used an awful lot, and I guess all you can be is
yeah,
the version of you that you can be.
100%. And that's kind of like the journey that I had to go on to get back to that,
Yeah.
because like my first reaction is, or my first, yeah, reaction, literally, not a response, it's a reaction, is I've got to do this thing right. Um, that's triggered loads of stuff for me. So in the sort of underneath the umbrella of attachment theories, there's this idea of internal working models, which is the the framework or the lens through which somebody views the world, and that's created um, through interactions in infancy and childhood with their caregivers, experiences as they grow, and things like that. And they build this model of the world and how they kind of anticipate it to be. My internal working model of the world is somewhat that the world is not completely unsafe, but I've kind of got to be on my guard. I've got to be vigilant. And then when I dig deeper down into that, well, why might I have created that lens through which I see the world? My um, my kind of shame, if you will, through my own therapy, that I found out is that, I have this sense of not being good enough, and a shame about that as well. And also, conditions of worth, the things that I believe that I need to do, or the person that I need to be to kind of feel accepted and be worthy of love and affection. That's for me is something like stay out of people's way, don't be a burden, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So when something like this comes along, and I get very kindly invited to do this, with you, um, immediately that kind of those things get poked. And for me, there's this like, right, this is an opportunity here where my shame about not being good enough might be revealed. I might expose it to the world because what if I maybe don't articulate myself quite how I would have liked to have done? Or I might even actually have interpreted something wrong. And if I say that on a podcast, I'm going to make a fool of myself. And,
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
this going on. And then there's another conflict because, uh, my way of feeling safe in the world is something like don't be a burden, stay out of people's way. And here I am kind of putting myself out there. It's a public thing. So this
Yeah.
feels really kind of viscerally raw and loaded with threat and things like
Okay.
that. And that's the first kind of response to it based on that history and my internal working model of the world. Um, so it's knowing that and then actually kind of pulling it apart and right, okay, what's really going on here? Well,
Yeah.
I know why I feel like that, and do you know what? Yes, I might still have that feeling of not being good enough, but let's kind of just go back through things, and I kind of call it a huge mountain of evidence that I have that I can go back to and go, well, no, that was a time that I proved that I was good enough, and that was a time that I proved that I was good enough, and I've done this and I've done that. So it's kind of psychologically retraining myself and hopefully down regulating myself as well to kind of no, that's just it's a reaction to a historic trauma, if you will, and it's not relevant in the here and now. And I've done loads of training, I've seen thousands of clients, I've sat in this uncertainty before, and I've survived, and it's highly likely that I'm probably going to survive this one as well.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because, and in I guess in the thing of clarity, it's the reason why when I've been invited onto a podcast and there's gone, oh, we're just going to have a chat and there's no real
Mm,
agenda. The point of dread of going, what do you mean? What are you going to ask me?
yeah,
and I've always gone, which is why when I did this, I've done this really big detail thing. Look, this is what we're going to do. This is the thing. Because I remember sending it to you and you went, I didn't realize it'd be that long. And I went, yeah, because in my way, that was going, well, this will make you feel really safe because I'm telling
yeah,
you
yeah,
exactly what I'm going to say. But I also appreciate that sometimes you can look at it and go, well, that's a bit overwhelming as well, isn't it? So
mm,
and
yeah. So in some ways, you're projecting your anxiety
yeah,
onto
100%.
the
Yeah,
guest,
oh,
really. Yeah,
massively.
yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
100. Hands up as well. Because someone just said to
yeah,
me,
yeah,
I'm not bothered. And I went, no, I'm probably doing it because it's how I would want to feel.
yeah, yeah.
So there's definitely that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what's really helped was like kind of just to go full circle to like being sat here and me kind of taking this route of like, well, I'm just going to say what's going on. Is that I actually having gone through all the like, right, I need to prepare and I need to kind of like, what do I want to say to this question and what might I want to address here and what might and like kind of getting lost in my thoughts and then realizing actually if I just practice what I preach, which is I understand myself to the best of my ability. Um, I try and show myself compassion, um, and I'm trying to be kind to myself and know that I'm good enough and be emotionally honest. And then I realized that hold on, Andy said this is about authenticity and not being rigid or rehearsed or anything. So if I just be myself and just be honest, I literally can't get it wrong.
No, yeah, and, for, and do you know one of the things is that the whole point of this is to have these honest conversations,
Mm,
and the whole point of this is to come on sometimes. Let's be completely honest. My anxiety level went through the roof trying to say the word relationship integrative. I was thinking, oh my gosh, how many times am I going to fall over this? I've literally sat here practicing it with a coffee before, going, come on, you can say this, you can say, because I always stumble over my words. And so it was one of those things. I read that, I went, oh my gosh, why have I chose to read this out? But and again, that's the bit, isn't it? I'll relate, and then we'll get into the kind of the core of what we're talking about.
Mm,
I use this story a lot. I coach a really, really talented CEO, and we were talking one of the conversations we first had, and we were talking about role modeling. Okay, so you're
mhm.
saying like this: who would be somebody that you would aim to be like? And she went, someone like you. Oh, why? What is it about me? She went, well, you've just got all your shit together. At that point, I, my professionalism was like, oh, I can't control it. And just burst out laughing. I went, what on earth give you that impression? I
Yeah.
says, I've got all my issues. I've got all the stuff that's going on for me. I think the difference is I'm comfortable and I own it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I says, I can talk with confidence because I'm really, really comfortable after, like you said, of a long
Mm,
journey of having a lot of these conversations and people like yourself, where I can turn around and go, well, if you ask me what's my flaws,
yeah.
I can probably label them for about 3 days. Where I struggle as well, go, what would you say your strengths are? Well,
Mm, yeah.
that's where. So being comfortable, I've just become very comfortable. And she just went, all right, okay, I want to get to that stage. Then I went, okay, that's awesome. That's a good kind of way to start, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's self-acceptance, isn't it?
Mm.
That is literally like this is who I am. I can't remember where I read this. I think I've got an idea. It was maybe 12 or 15 years ago. There was I don't know when. He had quite a high profile at the time. There was an NLP coach called Jamie Smart. I don't know if you ever came
Mm.
across Jamie Smart or
Yeah.
not. Followed him for a while, bought a couple of his books, really enjoyed his stuff. And I'm pretty sure it was him, but I think it was he said something in a seminar that I was listening to. It was something like, if being hard on yourself worked, it would have worked by now. And
Oh,
that for me was
nice.
just kind of this, like, just flipped everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, right, okay. So what if I stopped doing that and just
Yeah.
worked with like this raw material of what I've got, you
Yeah.
know? And that it was kind of liberating in a way, and it stayed with me. And that what you said there about like being disclosing to your client your flaws. One of the really nice things about the way I practice this kind of relational modality is that there's a certain amount of leeway for self-disclosure with clients as well. You've got to be careful what you disclose and make sure that it's in the best interest of the client. But I find that really useful because that kind of it, I can bring a vague experience that you know and I never really explicit about what's happened, but it helps me give them get a better understanding of what's going on for them, and hopefully my disclosure as well helps to somehow normalize it for them as well, because I think sometimes people like come and see a coach or a therapist, and like you say, they have this concept or preconception that like he's sorted. If he's sorted, he can sort me. And you're
Yeah.
like, well, no, I'm a human just like you.
Yeah.
I'm flawed. I've got my own stuff, and you know what? That's okay, and we can kind of work our way through this to the best of our ability.
Yeah. I like that. I think the same. We're always a work in progress is something I probably use
Yeah,
an awful lot.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so the whole theme of this, I mean, we've started off on a brilliant theme already. So I knew this would be good. Um, so the theme is kind of looking at, how do we lock the best out of ourselves? And we might take that like you've done. You've been very honest about how you get the best out of yourself and give a brilliant example of what you've had to do in preparation for this. And then, but it might also be, you know, advice from your experience. There might be people listening that, I know you've got a real good background in leadership and sales as well. And, the listeners are quite split across sport, across business, across people that are making the jump from healthcare out of healthcare. That we've got a really large split. We've got listeners in South Korea now,
Wow.
which is shows you kind of how things expand, and so I guess for me then it's how if there's people listening, what can we start to do to help them find their way to become optimal? So we're going to explore that bit, and then we're going to look at, okay, so if you are in a leadership position, or you are a person of influence, within a team, or with friends and people, how can you then help unlock the potential in others that you're around supporting? And then we always wrap it up, because we want people that have listened to us for about 50 minutes, for the last 10 minutes to go, okay, so what are we going to do with
Yeah.
this, and how can we actually take this going
Mm.
forward? So if we start with kind of unlocking self, if I just kind of play that out to you, where does that land?
For me, it's a good question because I kind of unlocking myself is pretty much being at peace with who I am,
Yeah,
and it's self-acceptance. It's knowing myself, moments of emotional honesty, and self-compassion. That kind of checking in with myself, um, noticing the feelings in my body, and and then kind of working out right what's going on there, and why might I feel in a somewhat elevated state, um, and what do I need? And so there's a concept in therapy. I don't know, it might be the same in coaching, but it's called the window of tolerance. Don't know if you've ever come across that or not.
I, I'm aware of it. Yeah, but you can
Yeah,
expand on it.
yes. Yeah, so we've all got a window of tolerance. For some people, their window is fairly wide, and other people it's much narrower. And that window is kind of like our optimal zone, really, where we can um, work effectively, um, to a reasonably good standard, and cope with a level of stress, and it's not going to kind of dysregulate us in any way. Some people have got very narrow windows, so it doesn't take much to push them out of their window of tolerance, and they might go towards hyper arousal, where they become kind of anxious and go into fight or flight. Some people go into hypo arousal, which is the kind of flop, and uh, kind of fall apart, deconstruct. Um, and so I'm a somewhat kind of high, as you can probably tell, a hyper aroused person. So I kind of, all I ever want to do is remain for as long as I can in that window of tolerance. When I find myself kind of going out of it, that's when, if I'm aware of it, that kind of feeling that I'm getting a bit more anxious and what have you, that's when I kind of do an intervention, check in with myself, right? What do I'm feeling this, I'm feeling kind of hyper aroused. I know that I'm not going to be my best in that state. What do I need to do to bring myself back down? So like today, for instance, that was creeping, So I was like, right, well, I've got an hour now. What can I do? So I went for a walk, got some fresh air, came back. Just one of the chairs in my office is a recliner, so I just
Nice.
led back in that. Just did some deep breathing, uh, did a 10-minute meditation just to kind of bring myself back down into not not fully into the window, because I think doing something like this, you want to kind of bring a bit of energy to it,
Yeah,
but just so that I can kind of remain somewhat regulated. Um, so that's kind of how I do it, really. And then the other kind of, that's more cognitive things around that are just this idea of like, good enough is good enough.
yeah,
Like, I don't have to aim for perfection. Good enough is good enough. Don't put that pressure on yourself. If being hard on myself had worked, it would have worked by now. And to have that kind of, again, going back to this kind of, in my internal world of all these kind of things that have gone well and successes and things, and just kind of anchor on those things and remind myself that, you know um yes, there might be a kind of a concern or a fear that this shame of not being good enough might be exposed, but I'm gonna live. I might make a mistake, and that's fine. It's not going to lead to annihilation or anything
yeah,
like that. And that it's an old script, just that this continues to play out, and it just needs to be kind of recontextualized and put back in its right place. And that was for then, and I'm perfectly capable right now. So that's kind of what I do, really. Yeah, there's a kind of kindness to myself towards myself. That's self-compassion, um, which is it's not been something that I've been able to do for long, really. It's probably only really the last 5 or 6 years that I've been able
Okay.
to get comfortable with that because the world tells you, doesn't it? You know, that like unless you're 10x in everything, you're somehow
Yeah.
deficient or you are not good enough, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, do I want to buy into that? Do I want those to be my conditions of worth, these kind of externalized things, or do I want to create them myself? Um, and yeah,
And it's
that's kind of
interesting,
how I've
isn't
done
it?
it.
How where they come from as well, isn't it? I mean, and I don't
Mm,
know if we've got time to explore that. I mean, especially a lot of the leaders. Probably the majority of the work I do are founder based business owners. So there's that, and some of them incredibly successful, but still
mm,
in the mindset of day one of I've got to do everything. Everything's got to be done today because I'm going to lose that customer. And so even 10 years in, that same kind of startup pace that they run everything from, but to
mm.
the point of, I'd love to say my job was why people fly it all doing at the height. A lot of them are at the brink of burnout,
Yeah, yeah,
which and I'm assuming, and I'll lean into you to that some of that is probably staying in that higher state of arousal state far
yeah,
too long,
yeah, exactly.
not getting the regulation right and not being able to bring themselves down or giving themselves
Mm,
permission to bring
mm,
themselves down. Because that's the other thing I find
yeah.
is, whereas I'm hearing what you've kind of developed over the last 5 years is that self-compassion piece of saying, I could stay up there, but it's actually not productive, not helpful, and it's probably not going to make me good for others.
Well, I've been there before,
Yeah.
previous career. The reason why I left my previous career was because I was literally burnt out. I
Yeah.
kind of
Okay.
maybe I'm trying to think what I can remember leaving a career, well, it will be 20 years ago, where I was kind of just always at the office, leave the house at 6, get back to the house at 8. Um, wasn't seeing our young children because it was all kind of, grind, 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 like work, work, work. And it's just not, it's not sustainable. And I can remember sitting in my office, looking out at the team that I was leading and feeling kind of like a shell, really, and like really kind of frustrated. But then there was another kind of tension as well, because even though I felt like that inside, this hollow, kind of broken person that really wasn't enjoying um, the job that I thought it was going to be. But part of that job was to get those people that I was leading to aspire to do this job. And I'm like, there's an incongruence there that I can't, and there was only so long that I could tolerate that incongruence for that. It got to a point where I was like, my values and what I'm being asked to do,
Yeah.
it's not working. So I've got to go, simple as that. So for people listening, I think it might be useful actually. This has just come to me now. So whenever I begin working with a client, before we get into what you might call their presenting condition, I kind of take a like zoom up at like 10,000 feet really and kind of try and get a sense of who the client is beyond that kind of anxiety or bereavement or whatever. Because I think that's useful because that can then help you with formulations and things like that and treatment plans going forward. And a couple of the questions that I think people that listening might find useful are um, one around core beliefs. So in that kind of first or second session, I have a bank of questions and I just kind of pick and choose from each one, depending on the relevance. But when I ascertain trying to establish people's core beliefs, I might ask them something along the lines of, "What is one thing you believe about yourself that you wish you could erase?"
Okay.
And I also kind of encourage them to not think too long about it, like what is the thing that comes to mind. Um and, so, and that kind of helps me get kind of try and establish like what they think about themselves, basically
Yeah.
how they relate to themselves internally. And then another question that I think enjoy always feels like an unusual word to use in therapy, but I like the work. It's fascinating working with people. And it's an absolute privilege doing so as well.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I like asking people is I get them to complete a sentence for me. Again, just snap kind of thing. Whatever comes to mind is the first thing. And the sentence is, to be of value, I must. And how would you finish that sentence? And then what that usually reveals is their conditions of worth. So the things that they've come to believe about themselves, who they need to be, or how they need to behave to get acceptance or affection or love from people.
Mm.
And that I think asking yourself those kind of questions can help people start to pull together what their own internal working model of the world might be, and then do those beliefs serve you? Are they relevant now, or are they kind of ghosts from the past
Yeah.
that might need updating or laying to rest or whatever? Or just, in my case, kind of acknowledging and going,
Yeah.
oh, here you are again. I know what this is. You come to remind me. I'm not. I'm 52 next birthday. This is from 8 years old.
Yeah. Okay.
We're
Yeah.
done now. Yeah. I think another thing as well is that I'm assuming we've all got to a greater or lesser degree this kind of inner critic, this voice in
I
our head
definitely
that,
have. Yeah. Yeah.
well, yeah, and,
Yeah.
and I would wager for most of us that
Yeah.
it's probably not very kind,
Yeah.
and what I've done with mine, and this isn't kind of just me on my own doing this. This is with the help of my own therapist and my supervisor as well. Um, is kind of like embraced it in a way and gone like, right, okay, what are you here for?
Yeah.
Right. If I was to look at you, I consider you as to be like adaptive in some way. Why are you what are you doing? Because you're still here. If you weren't useful, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And what I've found, and I dare say it might be the same for most people, is it's in a very unkind way, it's trying to motivate me to do the thing that gets me as far away from that shame being revealed as possible so I don't ever feel it. So that shame about not being good enough, it tries to berate me to work harder to do the thing that will keep that shame as far out of awareness as it can be. And it's a case of like, right, okay, if that's what you're trying to do, I get it. Yeah, I don't, it's not going to be good to feel that shame, but that shame's not really relevant anymore. It is historic. And maybe it might be good to feel it sometime as well to properly put it to rest. But if you are going to kind of try and motivate me to do that, could you maybe do it in a bit of a nicer way? Can you find a kinder way to do it? Because you know, 52 years or 45 years or whatever of this kind of unkind voice berating me, it's not really worked so far, has it? So
But I think it's a
yeah,
really
just kind of
interesting,
reframing it, I suppose, isn't
and
it?
I think it is. I really love that, and it's actually interesting enough. It's come up a couple of times in these conversations about the inner critic, and
Mm.
okay, so what is the positive intention behind it, almost, and if you can have a conversation with it. I know you're trying to be helpful, but the way you're delivering this has not been helpful so far. So, is there a different way to reframe this? I think that what you used, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's a lot of people that were, when you said inner critic, will be nodding and going, "Yeah, I definitely was." And
Mm.
I've always said for me, when mine is at the highest, I find nothing can reduce it until I come on the mat,
Right. Okay.
because I have to be
Yeah.
completely present because someone like
Mm.
yourself or somebody else is attempting to strangle me. So I can't be in, I can't think about anything else in the world. And it's almost like it turns the volume down. That's the best way I can describe it. It's like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
volume can be like a telly that's too loud. I walk in, I walk out, and
Yeah.
and for a time it can be even muted.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
and that's like you said, that it's just being that present that just seems to be really, really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have an
I mean,
absolute shocking training session, by the way, and it does, and so the inner critic will eventually kick in and went, "We didn't do very well there, either, did you?" But it does definitely turn it down. Yeah,
yeah, I would agree with you with the jujitsu. I also think that for me as well, like when I would do longer runs, like that was always really kind of cathartic. And if I need to get back into the habit of doing it, but I would regularly get up on a Saturday morning and do 10 miles. And like it was great, so many levels, sense of accomplishment, that thing of like getting a hard thing out of the way. It's not an insignificant distance. But it also, I don't run with headphones. I literally just kind of am in the world, like kind of taking it all in. And whilst I might not be kind of deliberately working through stuff in my head, by the time I got back home again after the run, it just felt like all was right with the world. It was
Yeah.
enough to kind of like, oh, everything's okay here. So yeah, I think it's things like that. And again, going back to my supervisor, his strategy for dealing with it is to acknowledge it. He calls it his gremlin. So
Okay.
he kind of acknowledges it, and he visualizes kind of sending it off in like a big white room, sending it far off into the corner so that it's just a little dot. So it's just like turning the volume down is kind of creating
Yeah.
distance with it as well.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and again, it's like, it's kind of acknowledging that I know you're here. I know that you think you're serving a purpose. Might not be necessary right now, but thanks anyway, kind of thing. It's like just
And I guess just, just thinking for people listening then, if let's say, because exercise is used and both of us seem to be, we've both used exercise as our way of managing our inner critic, gremlin, whatever you want to call it. Um, and we've, I think we've very similar journeys around our self-development, self-acceptance piece of, it's taken us
right.
to a certain level of age on it to get to the point where we're
Yeah.
good at it. At what point with, for people listening who are maybe resonating with some stuff we're talking around that are using exercise, at what point would you suggest actually they do need help and support, and actually coming to see
Mm.
someone like yourself would be, a good addition to their own strategies that they've got?
Yeah, I always feel a little bit of a fraud when I'm kind of discussing what I call like the scaffolding or the fundamentals of like good mental health with clients, and it's things like I would suggest seeing a therapist when you can tick the box of like I've got my sleep's dialed in, I'm happy with my sleep, my diet's okay, I exercise to a reasonable level, um, my relationships and my connections with people are okay as well. I call those kind of like the foundation to good mental health. If you can tick those boxes and you're still in some kind of psychological distress, then I would consider seeing, because I think doing the getting the foundations right for a lot of people would probably mitigate a lot of the kind of mental psychological issues that might develop if they're not in place. Um, so
And
that'd
again,
be my best advice, really.
no, I love that because I think it also aligns with what the podcast is around, is around optimizing and unlocking ourselves,
Hmm.
isn't it? Human potential. Get the basics right as well, isn't it? Are you sleeping enough?
Yeah.
Is your diet good? Are you getting out in some fresh air and just moving? All of those things are, and they're all the things that sometimes busy people forget, don't they? They don't have time to
Mm,
catch up with their friends. There's almost for a long time, it was almost like a badge of honor to say, "Oh yeah, I can survive on 3 or 4 hours sleep." It was
yeah.
it was almost a sign of going, "Oh yeah, I'm working so hard that I don't even have to sleep." Um, you know, a lot of people I see don't, especially in my old career, when they'd say, "Okay, so could you give me 30 minutes to do some exercise?" No, I'll never be able to fit that in. So if you're not
Yeah. Yeah.
exercising, you're not sleeping, which then puts your nutrition out as well,
Yeah.
then it is going to
Yeah.
affect everything
Mhm.
physiologically inside of you, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I do a bit of work with like private medical insurers, employee assistance providers, and many people that come through those channels are kind of in the area of burnout. And a lot of the time, a not insignificant amount of time, it's because the culture in the workplace is this kind of badge of honor. We're working in these high stakes, high stress environments, and well, if you've got to be able to tolerate it, and then you want to fit in. This is going back to attachment here. You don't want to be kind of um, ejected from the tribe, or
Okay.
because then you're vulnerable, you buy into that whether you want to or not, and then you find yourself, maybe your nervous system has to kind of be elevated, and you're in this chronic anxiety, chronic hyper arousal, fight or flight all the time. You never come out of it. Well, that's only going to end one way.
Yeah. And
Simple as
I think it's
that.
really important that we have more and more of these conversations, aren't they? And I think
Mm.
I, what I'd like to touch on, and I'm conscious that I knew this conversation would go the way it's going, and I knew it could go on for hours, which is great. I guess just conscious that you talked around this male gender script. It'd be really nice if you could just touch on that about
Yeah.
where does that land?
Okay. So I did kind of got some notes here because I want to get this right. Because I feel it's kind of important. So I came across Dr. John Barry's work maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he's put forward the idea of this male gender script, which is basically men are expected or even rewarded for being stoic, showing mastery over their emotions, protecting and providing, achieving status, and for a lot of and that they are kind of they're rooted in evolutionary biology. So way back when, those traits were essential to keep people alive, basically. Kind of go out there and get the food, and you had to show mastery over your emotions, because if you were in a battle and you went to pieces, then you were going to get
Okay.
killed. So
Yeah.
you kind of got to remain,
Yeah.
together. And so what's that's become kind of encoded almost in kind of masculinity, and that's kind of a standard or ideal that many men feel they have to meet. um so being a protector and provider, being able to fight and win, and again show mastery over their emotions. And then what happens for a lot of men is, if they feel that they're somehow not meeting those requirements, which again are kind of, at first it's easy to think they're kind of imposed on us kind of societally or culturally, but they are literally encoded in evolutionary biology. Um, that's when the kind of distress comes from a male point of view, the loss of status. I'm not doing good enough. Nothing's ever,
Yeah.
can't get a break. Um, and yeah, that's broadly the male gender script, really. And I think many men don't really realize that that's there on their shoulder as this kind of unconscious set of rules or framework that they're kind of measuring themselves up against. And many men feel that they're failing because they're not meeting those requirements, they're not living up to that. um, they can't express it, they can't be
Yeah.
explicit about how they feel, they're not doing it because, sadly, one of the tenets of the male gender script is to show mastery over your emotions. So
Okay.
by expressing that, you're actually violating it, and
Yeah.
people might see that as, men can be uh, applauded and celebrated for living up to the gender script, but also that it can be used to shame men as well.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, there's this tension of like, I'm not meeting it. Can't say I'm not meeting it because then I'm exposing the fact that I'm flawed, and I'm ashamed of this. So what happens? They say nothing, and they've got this battle going on inside them, and then that's why they kind of end up acting out, substance abuse, too much drinking, drugs, violence, anger, frustration, depression, anxiety. That's it, basically.
No, but I think it's really important because I think, and the reason why I wanted to just touch on it, because I think you only have to, pick up an Instagram or something, and it's this, it seems to be um, a lot of, let's say, podcast hosts that aren't from a therapy background are
Right.
inputting at the,
Oh,
they're
right.
inputting of what it is, aren't they? And I think it's
Yes.
really important that we actually just, and I think you've articulated really well with the science behind why it is
Mm,
what's going on, and the fact that,
yeah.
just the way the world we are, we're pretty much safe, aren't we? We live in a house. We don't have to go
Yeah.
to Tesco, or the supermarkets are available, rather than go and get our own food, all of those things. And actually,
Yeah.
you know, well, we both came onto this and we both opened up with saying, actually, we get things wrong. We've got stuff going on
Yeah.
in our world. We're not perfect, actually, but we're working
I
on
think
being comfortable.
what's what's missing for many men is the understanding or the appreciation or the acknowledgement or the acceptance that you can be both strong and emotionally available and open.
Yeah. Okay.
I've got two sons, 20 and nearly 24, and I hope that they can see like the spectrum that that I kind of give out. I'm very much more so since retraining and doing this job a few years ago, but very kind of open about my emotions, and I'm not ashamed of telling them what's going on for me. And I don't think that is that's to my detriment in terms of whether they see me as a strong male or not.
Mm,
I'm very comfortable with how they see me. It's certainly don't get any. I don't feel like I'm any less than or deficient in some way because I'm able to do that. But that I'm not saying it's been easy. It's a risk, isn't it?
yeah,
Like
it is.
we can idealize the kind of the masculine figure in our life because they're the protector and the provider, and to take the risk of showing your vulnerable side is literally that. It's a risk, but again, I feel like I've got a duty to do it because I want them to be able to know that it's safe to do so because the people around them will then be safer as well.
I love that. I really like that.
There's
I'm
a
con.
there's
Go on.
a part just to kind of like
Mm,
round that bit off. There's a part of like John Barry's work is this idea of gamma bias as well. So that male negative behavior tends to be magnified. So things like violence, greed, toxic masculinity. Male positive behavior like sacrifice and protection tends to get minimized, and so does male victimhood as well. So what I'll just read it out here. What
yeah.
he says, he said the male gender script becomes toxic not because of the traits themselves, because for example, stoicism is a virtue in a crisis, but because modern society has stopped valuing the pro-social aspects of the script while simultaneously pathologizing the biological drives. So I'm going to read this out as well because I think it's useful. So there's a lot of young men following kind of extreme online influencers. There's this whole kind of toxic masculinity debate. This sort of perspective from here is like those boys that do that, they're starving. We've stripped away positive male initiation and we tell them that their natural boisterousness and drive are problematic. When society fails to provide a healthy, integrated blueprint for how to be a strong man, young men will inevitably gravitate towards whoever is offering any blueprint, even an extreme or distorted one. It's an attachment cry for leadership,
Okay.
which that's why I wanted to read that out verbatim because I think that kind of says it all, really.
It does.
And so that's the male gender script, and I think and I hope as well that it gets more and more of a profile, um, and more research gets done on it because I think it's a really useful way of looking at male mental health.
Yeah, and again, I've got some in my own personal life. Some really close friends of mine have really, some really struggled with it as well. So there's a lot of resonance when you're saying it, and it's certainly maybe, probably, and hopefully a part two. If I can convince you to come back and we can really explore
Yeah.
that, because I think it is really important, and I don't want to, and I think it would be good to try and give it some. So just, I'm conscious for you. I know you're on a deadline, and the listeners as well. If we were to start to kind of wrapping up for listeners now, what
Yeah.
what three practical things would you suggest people
Okay.
listening could try?
So I know this is kind of like uh, unlocking people's potential as a leader as well, and we've not really got into that, but like just to kind of uh, put a bit of a starting point in for that. My kind of premise there was um, effective leadership is basically applied attachment theory. So,
Okay.
like the leader perhaps should consider, it's just a kind of a perspective, but maybe the leader should consider themselves to be a primary attachment object. Okay. So what I would say there is, so attachment, secure attachment, insecure attachment. Underneath insecure attachment, you've got avoidant attachment style and an anxious attachment style. There's some others, but they're the kind of broad ones. So an avoidant leader, they might struggle to be a secure base or a safe haven for the people that they're leading, because they perhaps value self-reliance above everything else, and they might see weakness in a team member. Sorry, they might see like a team member's need for support as a weakness. An anxious leader, they might struggle to be a secure attachment figure because they might be micromanaging as an attempt to kind of stay close to whatever the work is, control the outcome. And that can stifle a team's ability to explore and to feel safe and grow and take risks. So I just kind of wanted to put that as a headline. But in terms of what people can do, actionable steps, as leaders, I would suggest practice active availability. So it's not enough to have like an open door policy, because if your body language says "don't bother me," then you're not a secure base. You're perceived as like consistently unavailable. It's kind of okay. And what we inadvertently do, or what we could be inadvertently doing, is like leaking through our own internal working model, leaking our own anxieties into the workplace as well. And people react to that, and then that might kind of put them in a hyper aroused state, because rather than being as effective as they can be, all they're doing is managing your mood.
Yeah.
Okay, so that gets kind of taken away from the actual goals of the business or the company. So I would suggest maybe spend 10 minutes a week listening to a team member's challenges without offering a single solution.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so that you are showing yourself to be that secure person that they can feel safe disclosing things to, and they know that their status isn't at risk. And if you do that, you will ultimately get more out of them. I think there's a researcher called Amy Henderson who did work applying attachment theory to leadership, and she said that the most successful teams weren't those with the fewest problems. They were the ones that reported the most problems, because what they did, they felt secure enough with their leader that they could report those problems early, knowing that there was no fallout from it, because they felt safe and secure enough to do so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, loads. And that's a lot of the stuff that I've looked at around psychological safety, and the people that are coming on talking around that
Okay.
are really leaning
Right.
into that to
Okay.
say, actually, if
All
you
right.
create a really psychological safe space, actually, people report loads more stuff because they're more
Right.
likely to go, okay, actually, I'm not going to be, there's no consequence of me
Yeah.
actually coming up and saying this isn't. So actually, yeah.
Exactly.
So you get
Whereas if
more,
they don't feel safe,
well,
they'll
just don't
start
engage.
hiding things, they
100%.
don't tell you. Yeah. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
that's really, really good.
Uh, and then the other thing I'd say, just like the final point, I put like regulate your own affects, your own emotions. So if you're leaking anxiety or anger into a room, your team they'll prioritize managing your mood over their actual KPIs.
Okay.
Okay, so
Interesting.
learn to develop your own emotional regulation, maybe even as part of a strategic business necessity. I really like the idea of when I saw that was one of your questions, it kind of stumped me at first, because I was like, well, I'm a kind of sole trader, one man band. I don't lead people. And when I did, I was much more kind of naive back then and kind of almost white knuckling it, really. And it's the classic case of like, oh, if I knew then what I did now. So I was a bit stumped. And then when I kind of came across this concept of applying attachment theory to it, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense, really.
Yeah.
And it seems like you've got an awareness of it as well.
Yeah.
And
No,
it'd be
definitely.
interesting to kind of learn more about it, really.
Well, there's loads of those topics coming up on the pod over the next few. So yeah, there you go. There's something interesting. So what I'd like to do for the followers now, how can people who have loved this conversation, where can they find you and follow you? I know you've got a website and you do quite a lot of nice blogs.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page for the business. So I kind of go work under the banner of like business name of Crucible Personal Development. But the best place is probably the website, which is crucible-pd.com.
Yeah.
And then that'll take you to the homepage, and then there's a blog link there, and I put a blog post out every couple of weeks or so, and it's kind of loosely informed by, obviously anonymized and for confidentiality, but a lot of the content comes from what people bring into this room, and people will be familiar with the kind of the presenting conditions and things like that. But absolutely love what I do. I finally kind of feel at home in a career. I've never really quite felt quite settled, but this is like, all right, yeah. If this isn't home, then I don't know what is.
And you can tell, because I think when you were talking, you can just see how the animation and the smile all the way through this. So that really beams across as well.
And again, I'm gonna anchor this now, because what you just said there, I've just got goosebumps. It's made me feel really good, and it's also kind of given me more evidence that just be yourself, Paul. Yeah. Just bring yourself, be authentic, do the thing that you do sat with these people here, and you'll be all right. And I know it's like 1:57, and unless anything catastrophic happens in the next few minutes, it seems like I have survived this as well.
Well, yeah. And so for one final question, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. What's one final challenge you're going to set the audience?
Sit yourselves down and answer those two questions about core beliefs and conditions of worth. Brilliant. So what is one belief about yourself you would like to erase? And complete the sentence, to be of value, I must, and just see what you come up with, and then maybe reflect on that, pull it apart, and ask yourself, are these serving me? Are they relevant? Are they kind of ghosts from my history that can finally be laid to rest, that are somehow they're still kind of polluting the present? And see where you go with it.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you ever so much for your time, my friend. It's been
welcome.
Amazing. Thanks all.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Good. Right. And to the listeners, thanks all for listening, and see all the everything will be in the show notes. So make sure you do follow Paul, and take care. Have a wonderful day.